starting some. Said you wanna be starting some.
What is it they say about Queensland? Beautiful one day, completely speechless the next. I've woken up this morning, my voice has decided to take a late holiday, so I apologise in advance for how croaky it is, but we'll try our best and we'll get through it. This week, we're taking you on a drive just outside Brisbane, up to the picturesque Lake Wivenhoe. We're going to have a look at the dam up there, but importantly, we're doing it in a city-focused electric vehicle, because a lot of the criticism that electric vehicles get is that they're perfect for city drivers, but not so good when you want to head out on the open road. Well, we're going to show you that they do work. We're going to take you on a really interesting and enjoyable road trip that keeps us about 100 kilometres from the Brisbane CBD, and we're going to do it in the little GWM Ora that's behind me. Now, first up, we've stopped here at BP Pulse just before you get to Ipswich to charge the GWM up, because the hotel that we got into late last night didn't have easy access to power. But that's no problem, because we had located this charger on the map, so we knew it was on our drive out of Brisbane. What's important for me about this charging infrastructure is that even though you can only see 2 outlets behind us now, this is what the future is going to look like. You can get petrol and diesel over the back there, but it's this forecourt area that's got fast food and coffee shops, showers and toilets and bathroom facilities, plenty of places for the kids to get snacks. You can charge your devices in there as well. You can go inside, sit in the air conditioning, do a bit of reading, have something to eat, grab a coffee while you wait for your EV to charge. We've been here with the Ora for about 20 minutes. We're fully charged now. Let's hit the road. As we make our way out of the suburbs of Brisbane and toward the shores of Lake Wivenhoe, let's dissect some of the GWM Ora's numbers. The Ora hatchback measures 4,235mm long, 1,825mm wide and 1,603mm tall, with a 2,650mm wheelbase, placing it approximately halfway between a Toyota Yaris and a Toyota Corolla in terms of footprint, and 50mm shorter in overall length, but just a little bit wider than a Volkswagen Golf hatch. Powering the Ora standard range is a 48 kilowatt-hour battery pack, claimed to deliver 310 kilometres of driving range, while the long range and GT upgrade to a 63 kilowatt-hour battery pack with 420 kilometres of claimed driving range. Charging times are claimed as 41 minutes from 10 to 80% with the 48 kilowatt-hour battery that we're testing. GWM Haval Australia doesn't quote a figure for how much charging power the Ora cars can accept, though overseas specifications quote up to 80 kilowatts. All versions of the Ora are powered by a 126 kilowatt, 250 newton metre electric motor driving the front axle. The theory here is very much aligned with what regular front-wheel drive hatchbacks have always offered buyers on a tighter budget. But before we head out into the country, a couple of quick points to make about the GWM Ora around town. Does it make sense as a city car? You bet it does, absolutely. It rides really nicely around town and it's comfortable. You would expect that a small hatchback like this, with a 300 kilometre range, and keep in mind this is the base model that we are testing here at the moment, would work really well around town, and that's exactly what the Ora does. It's got enough room, it's comfortable, the ride's good. Part of town I'm in at the moment, there's a heap of those raised speed profile hump things, and it's not bottoming out or doing anything nasty over those. And despite the fact that an electric vehicle is intrinsically heavier, obviously, than a petrol or diesel version, this rides quite well. But the 300 kilometre range is worth noting, because for the average Australian, 20 to 30 Ks, as we say often, is about the commute each way to work. And that means if you've got something like this Ora with a 300 kilometre range and you largely exist in the city, this is going to do exactly what you need it to do. It's going to do it easily. So this does really well around town. We kind of expected that. As we say all the time when we're driving electric cars though, their least comfortable discipline is when you get out on the open road and do some touring. And that is exactly what we're about to do now with the GWM Ora as we leave Brisbane. Vehicles built in China, and the GWM Ora is one of those vehicles, don't always cop a lot of support from Australian buyers. But I'll tell you one thing that seems to me to be for certain, and the beeping that you'll occasionally hear in the background is the lane keep assist, which is a little bit enthusiastic in this car, so let's make that point. But one point for me seems almost certain, which is, at the moment, Chinese manufacturers are the only manufacturers that are even attempting to bring in electric vehicles and retail them at a price that makes sense to Australian buyers. So most electric vehicles in Australia are very expensive. The GWM Ora that we're driving now, that starts in the mid $40,000 range, is one of the more affordable electric vehicles. And the fact that the Chinese manufacturers are making electric vehicles more affordable than the more mainstream manufacturers means that more Australians are likely to be buying them as they make the transition to electric vehicles, because a lot of people can't justify the higher price. So what that means for something like the GWM Ora is that if you live in the city, but you do want to do the kind of road trip we're doing this week on Drive, you're going to have to take a city-focused EV and bring it out here in the country where, to be fair to electric vehicles, they're still not really in their comfort zone. It's a stinking hot Queensland day today. It's up near 40 degrees, it's humid. We're driving around in the heat with the air conditioning going at full bore, trying to keep the cabin as cool and comfortable as we can. So this is really dragging the Ora way out of its comfort zone, and yet it's done a very good job. And like we've said before on Drive, if you buy a regular small vehicle, something like a Toyota Corolla or a Hyundai i30, that might not be the vehicle that you would pick to drive from Brisbane to Melbourne, for example. But if it's the only car that you have, then you have to use it for that purpose. And that's the way we're assessing the GWM Ora on this drive, and it's been fantastic. It does the job. It's reasonably energy efficient in the way that it goes through its battery power. If you drive 80 kilometres on the road, it might have used about 95 kilometres of its range. So it's pretty accurate in that regard. And most importantly, and I think this is really important for family buyers, it's pretty comfortable and practical as well.
Upon its release, Ora became the most affordable electric vehicle available in Australia, with the sharp pricing and cute styling ensuring that city-focused EV buyers will take a close look at it. That was certainly the case during our drive. Everywhere we stopped, people wanted to talk about what it was and how much it was going to cost. Ora comes in standard range, long range and GT grades, and this week we're driving the most urban-focused of the lot, the standard range. The full pricing breakdown is available at drive.com.au, but the standard range Ora is available around Australia in the mid $40,000 range. The official GWM line is that pricing starts from $44,490 before on-road costs. All GWM Ora variants come with a high level of standard equipment with dual 10.25-inch interior screens, 18-inch alloy wheels, LED headlights, leather look power adjustable seats and a full suite of advanced safety technology across the range. Our standard range Ora also has features like a 360-degree surround view camera, wireless smartphone charging, Apple CarPlay and Android Auto.
I got a bad disease.
It's only about 75 kilometres from Brisbane, and what we're going to do on this episode is basically do a loop around Lake Wivenhoe. What you can see behind me is the spillway from Wivenhoe Dam. This is a really interestingly shaped lake, and because of that, there's lots of little areas that are worth exploring around it. It's got an island out in the middle of it. The Brisbane Valley Highway is what you can see up above behind me. That goes straight across the lake. We're going to drive over that in a minute. And of course, if you're into camping, there's plenty of that too, because there's a lot of awesome campsites around the lake. Absolutely worth coming out here to check it out.
It turned to demons of greed, that's me.
As big as the lake is, at the 2016 census, Lake Wivenhoe had an official population of just 3 people. That's right, 3. Wivenhoe is the name for both the lake and the region the lake sits within, and the formation of the lake created numerous headlands, inlets, bays and islands. It's the largest lake in southeast Queensland and provides more than half the region's drinking water. The lake and parks are open to the public during daylight hours, 7 days a week, and the dam itself covers around 2,700 acres with 462 kilometres of shoreline.
Walking home and talking low, seeing shows in evening clothes with you. From nervous touch and getting drunk, to staying up in a weekend hunt with you. And I was sleeping at the edge, holding something we don't.
On that subject of practicality, you do need to remember that this is a compact hatchback. It's quite small, so you've got room for 4 adults on board if you want to go for an overnight trip or a weekend away, but you're going to have to pack pretty sparingly because the boot is quite compact, so you can't fill that up with massive suitcases. You need to take that into account, but otherwise, in terms of the cabin ergonomics, it's a comfortable little hatchback. The way that this thing rides and drives and the way that it behaves is also pretty impressive out here on the open road. It's got a bunch of driving modes you can work through. There's eco, normal and sport. And to be honest, I'm using it in eco. I tend to get in electric vehicles and just leave them in eco because that's the most efficient mode, which is going to maximise your driving distance without really trying. So I've left it in eco. Things like the steering, the brakes, the fact that you can adjust the one pedal driving so that it kind of stops for you, and the feel of the Ora on the road are all pretty impressive, given again that we've taken it out of the area that it's supposed to excel in, on coarse chip roads, bumpy B roads out in the country. They're noisy road surfaces, and yet the Ora is doing a really good job out here. It's comfortable, practical, there's plenty of room inside the cabin. The cabin itself, I think, is a well-executed design. You've got the 2 big screens up in front of you, and once you work out all of the controls, they're pretty simple. There is some menu functionality there in the infotainment system that you need to get used to. Some of that is not as intuitive as it otherwise might be, and some of the more mainstream manufacturers that have spent more time developing their systems to make them easier to use, the GWM's probably needs a little bit more finessing, but the rest of the cabin is quite well executed. It feels like a decent level of quality here. It's not trying to pretend to be anything that it's not, but it doesn't feel like it's built down to a price either. The fit, the finish, all of the details, the switch gear, it's got a dial for the gear shifter. I think that's all well put together. And the interior doesn't look fussy. A lot of entrants into a market tend to go overboard with fussy details, lots of switch gear, too many controls, buttons everywhere. GWM hasn't done that with the Ora, so I think they've done a good job of laying it out and making it as practical as possible, especially for a buyer who is new, obviously, to the brand, but also new to electric vehicles and trying to get their head around how everything works. Tell you something that they do really well in Queensland, and that is rest areas off to the sides of the highway. It doesn't matter where you go, it doesn't matter what part of the state that you're visiting, these areas always seem to be really well facilitated. Behind me, you can see the Brisbane River and the O'Shea Bridge. We're right up at the top of the Wivenhoe Dam, or Lake Wivenhoe, up at the top end of it. So we're effectively at the halfway point now of our drive. We're only still around about 100 k's away from Brisbane City, so not that far at all. It's a really good rest point. You can pull in here, have a cup of coffee, go to the bathroom, do what you need to do, but it's a really nice place to stop, have a bite to eat, take a break on your way around the lake. That's what we're going to do now. We're heading for our overnight rest stop.
Situated in the valley of the lakes northwest of Brisbane, Esk is a town with an interesting history, and our stop for the night as we road trip around Lake Wivenhoe. Esk was an unexpected gem, especially the preserved nature of some of the town's buildings, with lots of timber and those signature Queensland verandas. Hiding in the shadow of Glen Rock and Mount Esk on the Brisbane Valley Highway, make sure you visit the beautiful Bellevue homestead, a fantastic example of what an affluent family might have built in Queensland in the 19th century. Make sure you grab dinner at the Grand Hotel and take a seat out the back as the sun sets.
Our drive this week brings us back to the bottom section, or certainly the section that's closer to Brisbane, of Lake Wivenhoe, which you can see in the background behind me. It really is an enjoyable drive. There's a couple of really interesting little country towns, some great places to camp, accommodation, food, all the things you want for either a day trip out of Brisbane or a weekend trip if you make a weekend of it and you want to stay away for 1 or 2 nights. It's a really interesting drive. The roads are good, not too much traffic, and there's plenty of beautiful scenery as well. That's one of the other things I love about Brisbane too. We're only about an hour outside the centre of Brisbane, and you could be anywhere out in the country here. It's beautiful, really easy to get to, and if you live in Sydney or Melbourne and you're watching this episode, you're probably thinking that it's nowhere near that easy to escape the city and get out into the country. And on that note, and I know if you're a Queensland local and you're watching this episode, you're probably thinking there's some amazing driving roads around here that they haven't touched on in that episode. We're aware of that, and we'll be back for them next time. Not next week, but we will come back and test those roads again. And in the meantime, we'll see you again next week for another great drive.
Mesmerized by what my eyes see.
We started our drive this week in the Brisbane CBD and stopped in at the BP Pulse Charger just off the Logan Motorway in Larapinta. Head on to the Warrego Motorway, then the Brisbane Valley Highway until you get to Fernvale, and then Wivenhoe Pocket at the edge of Lake Wivenhoe. We cruised around the lake in a clockwise direction, passing through multiple towns before making our way back to Brisbane. Coming up next week, I get a feel for G-forces and take a scenic run into the Blue Mountains in the fastest, most powerful Kia ever, the EV6 GT.